Alice Liddle's sacrifice into the hellish realm of Wonderland was just the beginning. Her survival would save all of humanity. What really happened during those missing years in the rabbit hole will blow your mind and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about fairy tales.
Thorn Bishop here, and welcome back to another classified briefing from Top Secret Inc. Today, we're diving in deep into one of Zenescope's most twisted fairy tale reimaginings with Grimm Fairy Tales, Alice in Wonderland from 2012. This isn't your childhood bedtime story, folks. Writer Raven Gregory and artist Robert Gill have crafted a psychological horror masterpiece that reveals the untold story of what actually happened to Alice during her time in Wonderland. For years, we only knew the aftermath. Alice returned as a broken, traumatized woman whose experiences left her family shattered. But this 6-issue miniseries finally pulls back the curtain on that nightmare that transformed an innocent girl into humanity's unlikely savior. Why does this matter to comic fans and horror enthusiasts? Because this story bridges the gap between Zenescope's popular Return to Wonderland trilogy and shows us exactly how Wonderland became the hellscape we know as today. It's the prequel that delivers both shocking revelations and sets up the entire mythos that would define Zenescope's Wonderland universe for years to come.
Before we dive deeper into the mission, let's pull the files on the key players: heroes, villains, rogues, and wildcard operatives. This is the subject profiles. Alice Liddle, the sacrificial lamb who became humanity's shield. A young girl torn from innocence and forged into a warrior through unimaginable trauma. Alice's journey from victim to savior defines the entire Zenescope Wonderland mythology. The Queen of Spades, the fallen guardian's redemption. Once a sacrifice like Alice, she chose to become Wonderland's protector from within, serving as mentor and guide to help others resist the realm's corrupting influence. The Jabberwocky, the cosmic devourer of hope. Not merely a dragon, but a force of entropy itself, this ancient evil feeds on despair and serves as the ultimate test of Alice's resolve and humanity. The Cheshire Cat, the smiling face of madness. A twisted guide who delights in psychological torment, offering cryptic wisdom that usually leads to greater suffering and moral compromise. The Queen of Hearts, the tyrant of broken minds. A sadistic ruler who embodies Wonderland's capacity for psychological torture, turning every interaction into a game where sanity is the ultimate prize. Alice's grandfather, the debt-bearer. A man haunted by his failure to protect previous generations, whose ancient mistakes force his granddaughter into an unthinkable sacrifice.
So we start things off with little Alice. And when I say little, I mean like 6 or 7 years old, standing in front of this massive oak tree that looks like it's been around since the dawn of time. Now, this isn't just any tree, folks. This bad boy's got a hole at the base that's big enough for Alice to waltz right through. And behind her, her grandparents, doing what grandparents do best, explaining some weird family tradition that sounds like complete nonsense. Listen, you need to go through the hole, Alice, they say. It's a rite of passage, or some bullshit like that. I mean, what kind of family tradition involves sending a first grader into a creepy tree hole? But hey, that's family for you, right? Exactly. So, Alice, being the brave little soul that she is, steps into the opening and discovers, surprise, it's not just a hole, it's a massive tunnel system that stretches about 20 feet tall. We're talking cathedral-sized proportions here, and that's when things get really interesting, because she starts hearing these voices. But not just any voices. Voices calling her name, telling her to keep walking forward because everyone is waiting for her. Now, I don't know about you, but when mysterious voices start telling me everyone's waiting, that's usually my cue to turn around and get the hell out of there. But Alice, she keeps going until, whoops, she trips and falls through another hole, because apparently this place just has holes everywhere. She lands in yet another tunnel, and that's where she meets the first Wonderland resident, Little White Rabbit. Now, this rabbit's talking, which is okay because talking animals in stories, I get it. But here's the thing, he's speaking English, but he's making about as much sense as a politician during election season. This guy's basically talking like he's completely lost his marbles. Alice realizes this potentially insane rabbit might be her only ticket back to the entrance. So what does she do? She starts chasing him, because nothing says good life choices like following a mad rabbit deeper into a magical hole system. Then eventually, they stop in this circular room. And guys, this is where things get absolutely wild. We're talking about a room with about 100 doors that are visible. But here's the kicker. Most of them are stacked vertically on top of each other, going as far as the eye can see. Like there's no ceiling here, just doors upon doors upon doors. Like some kind of architectural fever dream or something. The rabbit drops this bombshell on her saying, hey, each door leads to a different dream. Which is, either really cool or really terrifying depending on your perspective. Then the room starts to spin. Because of course it does. And the rabbit tells Alice to just hold on to something. And suddenly gravity decides to take a complete vacation and reverses on itself. And Alice is now falling past hundreds of these dream doors without being able to grab onto any of them to stop herself. And while she's falling, she sees some of the most trippy shit you've seen in ages. We're talking about like schools of fish floating around in midair, a couple of dudes rowing a boat through like nothing, some pigs going fishing, and some mice wielding ninja swords. At this point, I'm starting to think someone slipped something into Alice's morning cereal. She finally lands outside next to a tree. Not the same oak tree, mind you, because that would be too easy. Alice is all alone now, and that's when she sees several sets of glowing eyes in the tall grass. The voices eerily say that they can see her. Alice, being the polite child that she is, responds that she needs help. She needs help to get home. And that's when another voice appears, loud, deep, and asking, "What are you saying?" And then we meet the big bad of this story, the Jabberwocky. This thing is an absolute beast. We're talking about an enormously long green worm with an insect's head, green eyes, and buck teeth like a rabbit, with 2 arms and sharp claws on it. Basically, it's what you get if you crossed a caterpillar with your worst nightmare and gave it a dental problem. The Jabberwocky drops some heavy news on Alice and says, hey, you can never leave because, I need to feed on your life energy of innocence. She basically is his prisoner now, and if she tries to escape, he'll just eat her, which is about as comforting as it really sounds, right? But here's where Alice shows that she's got some serious emotional intelligence. She tells the Jabberwocky that she can see the pain and hunger in his face, and she offers to help him as long as no one gets hurt and she gets to go home. So, naturally, they strike a deal, which in hindsight might not have been the best decision on Alice's part, but we'll roll with it for now. The Jabberwocky shows Alice the looking glass, and no, it's not just a fancy mirror. This thing reveals the real world to Alice. She sees images of herself as a child and as a teenager, and the Jabberwocky explains that this is the Alice who remained in the real world. And to merge back, they need to touch hands through the looking glass. When Alice places her hands on the glass, the other Alice starts to pull her soul through. The Jabberwocky reveals his master plan. Alice's soul will remain inside the real-world Alice under his control until the bargain has been fulfilled. Through the looking glass, Alice watches herself 6 years of age, exit the oak tree, and greet her grandparents as they head home, leaving her in Wonderland. Time has no meaning in Wonderland, which is convenient for storytelling, but probably hell for scheduling. And years go by. Alice tries to escape multiple times, all unsuccessful. Now she's a young adult, maybe about 18 or 19, and she's basically been the Jabberwocky's roommate this whole time. One night she awakens by a familiar voice. The White Rabbit's back. The same White Rabbit who led her into this mess and now is here to help her escape. He gives her a magic mushroom, and before you get any ideas, it's not that kind of mushroom. This one's kind of like a sleeping potion. He tells her to place it under the Jabberwocky's nose so that they can make a clean getaway. Without hesitation, Alice takes the mushroom and carefully places it next to one of the Jabberwocky's nostrils. Then she and the rabbit makes a break for it into the woods, because nothing says stealth mission like running through the forest. After some time in the woods, they encounter the Cheshire Cat. But this isn't your typical grinning feline. This is a large beast that's part dragon, part cat. The Cheshire Cat wants to keep Alice as her pet, but the rabbit points out that she belongs to the Jabberwocky. The cat responds by taking a swipe at the rabbit with its large, long claws. Both Alice and the rabbit make a break for it through the trees with a massive feline in hot pursuit. They all end up in a clearing where Alice gets tangled up in tree roots. The same thing happens to the Cheshire Cat, but the roots look like they're alive and they engulf the cat. Then out of the ground comes this massive worm-like plant with huge jaws that looks absolutely famished. Alice manages to wriggle out of the roots, but the cat warns her that he'll get his revenge, because apparently every man-eating plant can't keep a good villain down. Eventually, Alice and the rabbit find a secluded cabin on the beach. Alice walks over to splash her face in some water, and out from the lake emerges a 50-foot walrus with black eyes. Now we hop into issue number 2 with the white rabbit popping out of a hole in the cobblestone floor like some magical groundhog. He's looking towards the throne and announces, "The job is done. Alice is free in Wonderland." And by free, apparently he means like completely screwed. But we'll get to that later. In front of him is this pool of black liquid that looks like tar, but acts like a weird shape-shifting entity. The liquid forms into a very attractive woman's body, and the rabbit refers to her as my queen. So, here's where we meet the Queen of Spades, and something tells me she's not here to play a friendly game of cards. We jump back to Alice, who's still standing in front of that monstrous walrus. From the end of the issue 1, this giant sea mammal looks down at her, get this, and politely asks how she would like to be prepared for lunch. Because apparently even cannibalistic walruses have manners in Wonderland. Prepared, Alice asks, probably hoping she misheard what he was talking about. He's like, yes, you know, like marinated, grilled, baked, fried, sauteed. He's basically running through a cooking show menu, except the main course is this teenage girl. Like Gordon Ramsay would be completely horrified by this. But Alice has learned fast at her time in this nightmare realm. She tries to talk her way out of it by saying she's the property of the Jabberwocky. The walrus calls bullshit, and Alice fires back with a, "Do you want to call my bluff?" Like, this kid's got some serious negotiation skills for someone who's about to become a seafood dinner. The walrus then starts shrinking down to her size, because of course he can do that, and they start talking about how each of them found their way into Wonderland. It's like a twisted version sharing origin stories at a support group or something. Meanwhile, back at the villain's headquarters, the Jabberwocky's absolutely losing his mind because somehow acquired a mushroom of sleep and escaped. The rabbit is getting blamed for Alice's disappearance, and this little fluffy buddy just throws the Cheshire Cat under the bus by saying the cat was trying to eat Alice the whole time. The Jabberwocky just wants Alice back, untouched. Now we get a flashback that goes centuries ago, showing the walrus when he was still a man named Tiberius, an explorer who got shipwrecked in a crazy storm. All his crewmates are dead, and Tiberius realizes he's stranded on this magical island with an excessive amount of animal life that he's never seen before. To make a long story short, a white rabbit appears and starts eating the remains of one of his former crewmates, because nothing says welcome to the magical island like cannibalistic bunnies. Tiberius chases this rabbit, hoping to find a meal, and ends up in a large pool of water with a rock in the center. On top of this rock are the bones of a walrus. He swims over to get a closer look at these bones, and the bones decide to jump him, because apparently even skeletons are aggressive in this place. They drag him deep into the water and start fusing with his body, transforming Tiberius into a walrus. It's like the worst possible outcome of a visit at the aquarium. Alice responds with, "That's a crazy story. Hey, whatever happened to that rabbit?" Because she's got her priorities straight, always keeping track of potentially cannibalistic wildlife. So we cut back to the White Rabbit now, who's appearing in the court of the Queen of Hearts, not to be confused with the Queen of Spades that we met earlier. Apparently, Wonderland has multiple monarchs and it's a big mess, which probably explains why it's so chaotic here. He informs to the Queen that Alice is loose and to not be touched, and if anyone hurts her, the shit's gonna hit the fan. The rabbit then leaves and ends up at the house of the Mad Hatter, where they have a conversation about Alice. The rabbit asks for help from the Mad Hatter. We don't know what kind of help because the Mad Hatter just smiles with this evil tooth grin, and I'm sure nothing good's gonna come out of it. Back with Alice, she's now sitting at the kitchen table in the Walrus's house. They're having lunch together. The food looks mostly rotten and about as appetizing as a week-old roadkill. The Walrus suddenly starts freaking out, telling Alice to find a hiding place because someone's coming. When the door opens, it's some Paul Bunyan-looking hipster dude covered in blood carrying a large sledgehammer. Apparently that must be the Walrus's roommate, which raises many questions about Wonderland's housing situation. Regardless, Paul Bunyan is confused because there's a meal prepared for two, and he came home a few hours earlier than usual. He immediately thinks that something fishy is going on, and in the house of the Walrus, that's probably true. Paul grabs a small hammer and clocks Tiberius right across the face with it, then grabs some rope, hog ties the Walrus, and throws him into a walk-in fridge. Talk about like roommate disputes here. Suddenly there's a large bang in the kitchen. Alice has fallen out of the pantry, knocking over all the pots and pans like some kind of slapstick comedy routine. Paul Bunyan runs into the kitchen, finds a scantily clad Alice sprawled all over the floor. And he's like, well, who might you be? And why don't we get to know each other a little better? I only want to play. And by play, he clearly doesn't mean board games. He starts approaching Alice and she's not having any of it. She grabs Paul's sledgehammer resting on the wall and slams it right into one of his kneecaps. Paul starts screaming in agony, but Alice isn't done with him yet. She grabs a pot of boiling hot soup from the stove and slams it right into his face. This girl's gone from polite little Alice to full-on action hero in record time. Fearing for her life, Alice opens the front door and beelines it off the property. Paul Bunyan starts hobbling along the ground trying to get Alice when he hears a voice. Little pig, let me in. The Cheshire Cat magically appears, and suddenly Paul's problems just got a whole lot worse. Paul slams the door in the cat's face and crawls away as fast as he possibly can. But the cat manages to make his way into the house anyway. With one swift swipe, the cat claws Paul Bunyan into 5 pieces. Paul, surprisingly still alive, is begging for mercy. The cat is trying to find information about Alice, but Paul doesn't give him anything and lets him know that he'll get his revenge. Because apparently even when you're in 5 pieces, you can still hold a grudge in Wonderland. Alice escapes into the woods, where all of the trees apparently have random signs nailed to them with complete nonsense written on them. It's like a madman spent an entire lifetime attaching them to these trees, which, knowing Wonderland, is probably exactly what happened. She eventually finds this beautiful brick house in a clearing. Finally, a place for her to hide and rest. Now we step into issue number 3 with the Mad Hatter in his walk-in closet, looking for something spiffy to wear. Apparently he's having company over, and in Wonderland, that's never a good sign. Before he can find a nice shirt, out pops the Queen of Spades, looking absolutely stunning in her signature shadowy liquid darkness. Because nothing says Casual Tuesday like a supernatural monarch materializing in your wardrobe. They're having a heart-to-heart conversation about old times, and she's giving him a little parting gift. It's called the Death Blade, and here's where we learn some crucial information about Wonderland's rules. You really can't die here. You can be killed, sure, but you just kind of resurrect yourself in the near future, like some kind of twisted video game respawn. But the Death Blade, well, that delivers permanent death. And just look at the Mad Hatter. He's absolutely thrilled to accept this kind gift without even asking if she wants anything in return. Because when the Queen of Darkness hands you a weapon of ultimate destruction, you definitely don't ask any questions. Now, we jump back to Alice, and she can definitely confirm that this girl has absolutely no concerns when it comes to breaking and entering someone's home. Hey, if the door's not locked, then are you really committing a crime? The house is very clean with family photos on the wall, and it looks nice and cozy, like a nice place to get some rest. She's confronted by Louise, a very attractive middle-aged woman, who exchanges pleasantries and invites Alice in for a cup of tea. Louise mentions she doesn't get many guests in this neck of the woods. Unknown to Alice, her gracious host is about to roofie her with some sleeping mushroom powder because apparently hospitality has a very loose definition in Wonderland. Louise keeps trying to get Alice to drink the tea, but Alice keeps finding excuses. She hasn't taken a sip of it yet. Smart girl. Considering her recent track record with Wonderland encounters, Alice starts telling Louise her story about how she ended up in Wonderland and all the recent close encounters of death. Finally, the tea cools down and Alice takes a nice swig because she's absolutely parched from being attacked multiple times today. Suddenly, Alice starts to feel a little woozy. Then she slams her head right into the coffee table, smashing it like a pro wrestler, like WWE would be proud. Now that Alice has been incapacitated, Louise decides this would be a perfect time to get completely undressed. She starts peeling off all the layers of clothing, then grabs the side of her face and removes what appears to be a mask. Plot twist here, Louise was really the Mad Hatter in disguise. He puts on a suit, tie, and a hat, then picks up the unconscious girl and carries her out of the living room because nothing says gentleman like cross-dressing to drug a teenager. The scene moves to a tea party happening in the woods, because this is Wonderland, and of course it does. Here we have the March Hare, his servant, Cook, and another guest. The Mad Hatter shows up carrying poor little Alice like she's a party favor. The Hatter talks to the March Hare about their agreement to exchange the little girl for some medicinal items for parting use. Then Alice wakes up, and the March Hare introduces himself as her new owner. At this point, the Mad Hatter looks at his earnings and realizes he's been shortchanged. Like, even in Wonderland, no one gets ripped off in a business deal here. The March Hare tells the Mad Hatter to walk away, or else he'll have Cook soften him up. The Mad Hatter decides, hey, I'm not going to get ripped off here, pulls out the death blade and slashes Cook's throat. He then follows up by stabbing the other guest because why not? He was just kind of in the way. Now it's just him, Alice, and the March Hare. Talk about like clearing the table here. From behind the Mad Hatter, the Cheshire Cat starts to appear slowly from thin air, like the world's most terrifying magic trick. Both Cook and the other guests are slowly disintegrating into some black smoke, like this death blade doesn't mess around. The Cheshire Cat opens its mouth and offers to give the Hatter a hand, but really he just opens his mouth and takes a bite of his arm and rips it completely off. The death blade is now on the floor. The Mad Hatter is now armless and bleeding, which is probably not how he envisioned this tea party going in the first place. Then, a little dormouse runs over to the severed hand on the ground, bites one of the fingers, and drags it away with the knife. I mean, even the smallest creatures in Wonderland are opportunistic scavengers. The Mad Hunter, understandably furious about this sudden amputation, grabs a steak knife from the table and stabs the Cheshire Cat right in the eye, because if you're gonna lose an arm, you might as well take an eye out in return. At this point, a demonic shadow spirit appears out of nowhere, calling himself Death, and announcing he's here to collect those murdered by the Death Blade. This Death Angel dude collects the souls of Cook and the other guests and then just magically floats away like the world's most grim cleanup crew. At this time, you'd think Alice would just be chilling at the table enjoying the rest of her buzz from that magic mushroom. But no, she took off again. Issue 4 starts with Alice running through the woods, kind of like issue 2 and 3. Passing all those trees with nonsensical signage we saw before. You can tell by the way she looks, she's absolutely tripping balls. Hallucinating demons and people with mouths and jaws of the Jabberwocky, not to mention mirror images of herself being attacked by multiple people's arms. That sleep mushroom powder is really doing a number on her psyche. We cut now to a new scene in the courtyard of the Queen of Hearts' inner castle, where there's 3 beautiful women in the courtyard at the garden about to plant some roses. They're arguing with each other about what type of roses to plant because apparently everyone knows in Wonderland the consequences of planting incorrect flowers in the royal garden. Off with their heads. It's like an extreme garden where the stakes are literally life and death. Then we get the first John Cena moment of the issue. Alice comes crashing through some 8-foot hedges almost tackles all of the three girls. You can tell Alice is still a little stoned because she's got that look in her eyes and stares at one of the women and says, "Hey, you're pretty," and then immediately collapses to the ground. Like, really smooth, this girl. Alice then awakens in what appears to be a dream sequence. She's in her old bedroom back in reality. She's a younger version of herself crying on a bed. Young Alice starts blaming older Alice for all of her problems, telling her she doesn't understand the situation and that she's only a part of the puzzle. She's not seeing the whole picture here. And this is getting really deep. Like, little Alice explains that big Alice made a bad deal with the Jabberwocky. When little Alice returned through the looking glass, part of her soul was actually joined with the Jabberwocky. The longer his soul remains in reality, the easier it'll be for the Jabberwocky to escape Wonderland. What's even worse is that this is hereditary. Any children of Alice in the future will also carry the same fate of sharing their soul with the Jabberwocky. Talk about a generational curse that makes family dysfunction look like a minor inconvenience here. Alice wakes up from this nightmare naked in a beautiful bed in the palace, surrounded by the three women from the garden. Then she meets the Queen of Hearts, who reaches out her hand to Alice. Alice, slightly embarrassed by her nude situation, tries to stay covered with the bedsheets. The Queen orders a servant to get Alice's clothes and to tell her she's very excited to meet her and looking forward to showing her her world. Because nothing says hospitality like waking up naked in a stranger's bed, right? The Queen takes Alice for a stroll, and the Queen of Hearts' kingdom is the most beautiful place Alice has ever seen. Everything is peaceful. Everyone looks happy. This place seems to be perfect. Too perfect, if you ask me. But Alice hasn't learned to be properly suspicious yet. The Queen tells Alice she's aware of her situation with the Jabberwocky and doesn't intend to return her to him. She also mentions Alice doesn't need to fear the Cheshire Cat because he would never intentionally step foot into the Kingdom of Hearts. I mean, that's reassuring, considering the cat's recent track record with dismemberments. The Queen consistently offers Alice to play croquet with her. Alice declines each time since she doesn't know the game, so the Queen orders one of her subjects to play against her instead. But instead of mallets, they're using these pink flamingos, because apparently normal sporting equipment isn't too mainstream in Wonderland. The prize? Well, if the contestant wins, they're set free. And guess what? The contestant wins and starts jumping up and down with glee. He's won his freedom from servitude. What he doesn't understand is that the Queen plans on freeing him from his life. She grabs a double-sided battle axe from one of the guards, raises it overhead, and decapitates him in front of everyone. Because the Queen's definition of freedom is apparently quite literal. Alice starts freaking out because that's just dirty pool here. He should have been set free to leave the kingdom. The Queen walks over with a big grin on her face, carrying the battle axe, covered head to toe in blood, asking Alice, "What, you didn't like the game?" Alice responds that he won fair and square and the Queen should honor the prize. And the Queen's like, "But, I did. I removed him from his shackles." Technically, she's kind of correct about that. The Queen decides she doesn't like it when people talk back to her, so she calls the guards to have Alice taken away to stand trial for the crime of talking back at a later date, because apparently having opinions is illegal in the Kingdom of Hearts. We jump now to the courtroom where Alice is sitting in the witness box. The Queen is sitting in the judge's throne. Honestly, this doesn't seem like it's going to go very well for Alice at this point. The defense is a little boy wearing a crown. At some point during the trial, the Queen calls him "my king," which is weird because the king doesn't look like he hit puberty yet. To make a long story short, the Queen finds Alice guilty, and instead of off with her head, she taps Alice on the forehead with her finger, and Alice then suddenly breaks apart into 100 little puzzle pieces. The Queen leans over the witness chair and starts rummaging through the pieces of Alice, saying, "Next time, you should learn to keep your mouth shut, little girl." Because apparently even in puzzle form, Alice needs to learn royal etiquette. At this point, Alice is falling through the ceiling through a black shadowy circle. She lands flat on her ass and is confronted by a black shadowy tar-like form. She's unaware that this is the Queen of Spades. That shadow tells Alice, "I want to help you fulfill your destiny." The shadow then fully transforms into an absolutely gorgeous woman wearing a black crown. She looks down at Alice and tells her, "I'm here to help you kill the Jabberwocky." Issue 5 begins with Alice's grandparents standing in front of the old oak tree, and they're somewhat panicked because they're worried about Alice, even though they kind of forced her to go in the hole. Then we have a young Alice crawling out of the tree, explaining to her grandparents that she's feeling ill. They take her back home, and behind closed doors, they're arguing with each other because apparently that was supposed to be a one-way trip, like a sacrifice to the gods or something. Now, they have to contact Alice's parents because they need to find another way to get her back to Wonderland. And then we find out that Alice was sent to Wonderland to somehow save the world because nothing says loving grandparents like using your granddaughter as some kind of sacrificial offering. Then the scene switches to a young Alice in her bedroom with confusion in her eyes. She hears voices of the Jabberwocky asking her for help, asking to be set free. She's not even aware of the evil inside of her. This is like having a supernatural parasite with a customer service complaint. Now we cut back to the big Alice in the palace with the Queen of Spades. The Queen is talking in riddles, and Alice is like, hey, just spit it out. Your English isn't making any sense to me. Alice tells her, don't expect me to trust you. Everyone turns their back to me in this place. The Queen of Spades responds, I despise both the Queen of Hearts and the Jabberwocky, and I guess we have some commonality. Both of them have massive armies. You are going to need a massive army to strike back with, and I know just how to get you one. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even when all the parties are potentially psychotic. Here, we find out the history of Elizabeth Allen, who is the Queen of Hearts. We cut to a scene where she's forcing the king to slit his own wrists. We also find that this is kind of like a daily ritual here at the Kingdom of Hearts. The Queen here, like Alice, found her way to Wonderland. She somehow defeated the Red Queen in physical combat and imprisoned her. The only means of freedom for the Red Queen is actually her son. Over decades of torment and mental abuse from the Queen of Hearts, the boy who is the true king has even forgotten about his mother. Who is she, and where she might even be kept? It's like the worst possible custody battle combined with Stockholm Syndrome. We jump to a scene where the Red Queen is locked up. Both Alice and the Queen of Spades are now there. The Queen happily starts decapitating the royal guards, and now the two queens face each other with Alice in awe, wondering because nothing breaks the ice like casual mass murder. Spades tries to convince the Red Queen that they're trying to help her to escape. The Red Queen doesn't want her help because she knows the Queen of Spades is evil and full of lies. Alice has a one-to-one with the Red Queen about her experiences, and Alice finds out that the Queen's power doesn't work behind this locked gate. The Red Queen doesn't tell her that her son has the key to open the locked cell because even in prison, you gotta maintain some operational security. The Red Queen reaches out to Alice's hand. When both hands meet, there's a flash of light and a tingling sensation. The Queen lets Alice know she's temporarily transferred all of her power to her until the next full moon. Alice now has the power to call forth an army to take over Wonderland. Talk about like a power upgrade. She's gone from a victim to potential conqueror in one handshake. The Queen of Spades now takes Alice to what appears to be a deserted graveyard. This is the birthplace of the Jabberwocky, the home of what once was the White Knight, a champion of Wonderland. The White Knight was originally murdered by the Jabberwocky here in this graveyard. She ends up finding like all these chess pieces. They both realize that the cards became soldiers for the Queen of Hearts, and now these chess pieces will become Alice's army. The power unleashes from Alice's hands, and thousands of chess pieces in gigantic sizes appear to do her bidding. It's like the world's most violent game night. Then the scene jumps back to the Queen of Hearts, where she's just murdering random guards because no one else can find Alice. At one point, she's threatening to murder the king again because Alice is missing, even though we know she's just going to have him slit his own wrists again later that day. The Queen of Hearts really has perfected the art of like redundant threats here. Suddenly, the Queen of Spades magically appears, and she tells the Queen of Hearts that she has Alice and she wants to make a trade. Then the Queen of Spades visits the Jabberwocky, the Mad Hatter, and the Cheshire Cat separately, telling them the exact same thing. Let's make a deal, because nothing says master manipulator like running the same con on multiple marks simultaneously. The Queen of Spades returns to Alice, who is now wearing a baby blue armor and carrying a fancy sword, and she asks the Queen of Spades if they all took the bait. Of course they did. The final issue begins with the Queen of Hearts looking absolutely gorgeous in a red and purple dress, carrying a blood-stained battle axe. She's surrounded by thousands of playing card knights carrying swords. She's got the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, and the March Hare by her side. It's like the world's most violent royal entourage. Alice and the Queen of Hearts have a brief chat about how each one of them is going to destroy each other. You know, like the usual pre-battle shit-talking. Then from each side of the playing field, both armies start running and attacking each other. This scene reminds me of the final battle in Braveheart, except with chess pieces and playing cards instead of Scots and English. Swords are clashing, bodies are dropping like flies, and large beasts and constructs are just stomping on all the remains. Now we cut to a scene on top of a cliff where the Jabberwocky stands with his servant, a woman cloaked all in black wearing a female metal face mask. She looks like she shops at the same mask store as Destro from G.I. Joe. From that cliff, they're watching the battle unfold when the Boy King unexpectedly shows up. I mean, I guess everyone needs to betray at least one person in this story. The Boy King informs the Jabberwocky that it looks like Alice is winning the battle. Here we learn the Jabberwocky is shocked with the amount of power that Alice has consumed in such a short period of time. We also learn that female Destro's name is actually Gravity. Gravity then raises her hands to the sky, and these swirls of black clouds start forming over the battle. Then suddenly, all the soldiers and creatures fighting start lifting off the ground, suspended. The Queen of Spades yells at Alice that the Jester, the wild card, also called Gravity, is doing this magic. Alice is slicing her sword through soldiers when the Queen of Spades tell her that they need to take Gravity out of commission like now. The only problem is that Gravity and the Jabberwocky are miles away from reach. Alice has an idea. She floats over to the Queen of Spades and tells her, hey, you got the power of all shadows, right? I need you to merge us both through her shadow. Alice starts to form behind Gravity and drives her broadsword right through the back of her spine and out of her chest. The Jester turns around to her and says, you know you can't kill me, right? And Alice slaps back, I don't need to kill you. I just need you out of the picture long enough for me to kill the Jabberwocky. Then the shadow forms underneath both Alice and Gravity, and they both fall through it, disappearing. They reappear in the middle of the battlefield. Hopefully this will keep Gravity subdued a little while. Alice then encounters the Cheshire Cat, and they go head to toe. The cat swats at Alice, Alice falls to the ground, and the cat's about to make a meal out of her when suddenly a battle axe comes flying through the air and completely takes off the Cheshire Cat's arm. Apparently, no one's allowed to kill Alice except for the Queen of Hearts. The Cheshire Cat is really ticked off, and I think, I'd be too if I lost my good arm. So he decides to take a bite out of the Queen of Hearts and the Queen of Spades at the same time, both literally from the waist down. Both of them are trapped in his jaws. Alice doesn't hesitate and jumps up to decapitate the Queen of Hearts, then takes off the head of the Cheshire Cat. I mean, if you can't kill them, at least you can slow them down for a little while, right? Back to the battlefield, it looks like Team Alice is winning. Then we see a massive worm-like form slithering over all the armies, the Jabberwocky. Alice redirects all of her soldiers to attack the Jabberwocky. He starts screaming in a fit of rage, "You think you know power?" Then all Alice's chess soldiers turn to stone and crumble into pieces on the ground. Talk about like a power move here. The Jabberwocky grabs Alice and raises her off the ground. Holding her in his fist, they start yelling back and forth about his plans to take over the real world and how she's going to kill him. Alice starts having flashbacks of all of her experiences with people in Wonderland regarding these, magic mushrooms that make you grow, that make you shrink, that make you sleep. Then she remembers the first day where she met the Boy King at the Queen of Hearts palace. He gave her a mushroom, and it says it was from her daughter. Alice was like, I don't have a daughter. And the Boy King responded, true, but someday you will. Alice takes the mushroom and pulls it out of her pocket and swallows it. This isn't a sleep mushroom. This isn't a shrink mushroom. This is a mushroom of giant growth. And she escapes his clutches and is now towering over the Jabberwocky. She punches him a few times in the face and then stomps on his head because sometimes the direct approach works better than conversation. Now we jump to a flashback before the battle where Alice and the Queen of Spades are talking about how they can deal with the Jabberwocky. The only way they know how to permanently get rid of him is to merge his consciousness with the other pieces of his consciousness in the real Alice in the real world. That's crazy, isn't it? This would drive Alice mad in the real world, but it's a sacrifice that needs to be made for the destruction of the Jabberwocky. So now we jump back to the battle. The Jabberwocky is nearly defeated on the ground. Giant Alice grabs him by his tail and drags him back to the Queen of Hearts castle. Alice knows that there's a looking glass mirror there. The Jabberwocky is screaming, and he's not strong enough to travel back to the real world. He knows he'll be trapped in the mind of the real Alice for eternity there. Giant Alice grabs him by the scruff of his neck and chucks him through that mirror. Back in the real world, Alice is staring at herself in the mirror when an image of the Jabberwocky fades into view. Like a spirit or a ghost, it passes through the mirror right into her eyes. Her eyes start to glow green, and she cries for her grandparents. Through Alice's eyes, we can see that the Jabberwocky looking in the mirror can see the giant Alice in the reflection, and he's screaming for his revenge. Back at the castle, the Queen of Spades slowly appears from the shadows. She walks over to Alice and shows her a swimming pool. In the reflection shows images of Alice's life in the real world, all the tragedies, all of the heartbreaks that happened to her in reality. The Queen of Spades tells her that all she has to do is enter the waters to return to the real world. Alice realizes that after all she's done in Wonderland, that she can never go back home. She leaves the castle and walks past all the remains of the dead soldiers in the battlefield. Here's where she finds Gravity, still alive, and she takes off the Jester's mask to find out it's just a girl like her. The wildcard's real name is Rebecca. Rebecca tells Alice it's best to stay here in Wonderland and there's nothing left of her in her past back at home. Alice then takes the mask and walks off into the woods. The final scene shows Alice eventually did make it back to reality. She grew up, got married, and had a child, and one day as an adult, Alice was taking a bath, and she started staring into the mirror. In the reflection was her past, Wonderland, and a little Alice screaming, "You can't let him out." The story ends with Alice's daughter discovering a tragic scene. While in the mirror's reflection, we can see the Jabberwocky plotting his return to Wonderland. Alice then slits her wrist in the bathtub, and her daughter Kaylee ends up finding her.
They told us not to ask questions. They said the files were corrupted, the intel classified, the case closed. But we kept digging. Welcome to Black Box Theories, where the facts don't add up, the coincidences aren't random, and the truth buried under layers of denial. Strap in, agent. You're not supposed to hear this. Theory number 1, the multiversal anchor. Classification, speculative. Alice's ability to resist Wonderland's corruption suggests she might be a nexus being across multiple realities, with each version of her story representing a different timeline where humanity either falls or survives. The split soul concept could be preparation for her to exist simultaneously across these realities. Theory number 2, the manufactured hero. Classification, probable. Alice's grandfather's death wasn't accidental, but part of a deliberate plan by cosmic forces to create the perfect weapon against the Dark One. Every detail of Alice's sacrifice was orchestrated to forge her into exactly what she needed to become to save humanity. Theory number 3, the temporal bootstrap. Classification, possible. Alice's actions in Wonderland might create a causal loop where her future daughter, Kaylee's experiences, actually influence the past events of Alice's own journey. The Queen of Spades could be an older version of Alice from a failed timeline. Theory number 4, the conscious realm. Classification, likely. Wonderland itself is a living entity that deliberately shaped Alice's experiences to test whether she was worthy of wielding its power against even greater threats. Every trial was a job interview for the position of multiverse defender. Theory number 5, the genetic legacy. Classification confirmed. The Liddle family bloodline carries specific genetic markers that make them ideal candidates for interdimensional travel and resistance to corrupting influences. Alice's sacrifice wasn't random, but the culmination of generations of selective breeding by secret organizations.
Some intel doesn't belong in the open. When a story gets too twisted, too dangerous, or just too damn weird, we file it under Red. This is the Red Files, classified content, high-risk statistics, and the kind of secrets you don't unsee once exposed. Proceed with caution, Agent. Red File number 1, The Carroll Connection. Lewis Carroll was actually documenting real events filtered through the consciousness of the Alice who remained in our world, which explains the dreamlike quality and logical inconsistencies in the original stories. Red File number 2, The Artist's Vision. Robert Gill designed Alice's character progression by studying actual trauma survivors, incorporating subtle visual cues about psychological development that most readers never consciously notice but subconsciously respond to. Red File number 3, The Family Business. Raven Gregory based the Liddle family's multi-generational curse on research into real families who claim to have hereditary connections to supernatural phenomena, lending an unsettling authenticity to the fictional elements. Red File number 4, The Reflection Rule. Every mirror in Zenescope's Wonderland stories contains at least one hidden detail that foreshadows future plot developments, creating an Easter egg hunt for dedicated fans willing to examine background elements. Red File number 5, The Sacrifice Counter. Alice's story was specifically written to be the 13th in a series of sacrificial tales within Zenescope's continuity, with the number 13 carrying specific significance within their mythology about cosmic balance.
The world building in this series operates on multiple levels that reward careful attention from readers. On the surface, we have Zenescope's signature approach of taking familiar fairy tale elements and twisting them into horror scenarios. But Gregory goes deeper, creating a coherent mythology that explains why these dark versions exist and how they connect to larger cosmic conflicts. Wonderland isn't just a random nightmare realm. It's a carefully constructed prison designed to contain threats to multiple realities. The tone throughout this series maintains a delicate balance between psychological horror and fantasy adventure. Gregory never lets the readers forget that Alice is fundamentally a child that's been thrusted into impossible circumstances, which makes her moments of courage and determination feel genuinely heroic rather than simply expected. The horror elements work because they're grounded in emotional truth. The real terror comes from watching someone we care about lose pieces of themselves to survive. Thematically, this series explores concepts of sacrifice, inherited guilt, and a piece of heroism in ways that feel mature and thoughtful. Alice's journey isn't just about defeating monsters, but about learning to carry the weight of responsibility for others' lives. This reoccurring motif of reflection, mirrors, looking glasses, seeing yourself and others, reinforces the theme that our action ripples outward in ways that we can't always predict or control. The symbolism operates on both obvious and subtle levels. The obvious symbols, mirrors as portals between worlds, cards as representations of fate and chance, the rabbit hole as a journey into the unconscious, work effectively without being heavy-handed. More subtle symbolic elements include the reoccurring use of splitting and fragmentation to represent trauma, the way Wonderland's geography reflects its inhabitants' mental states, and how traditional fairy tale elements are inverted to represent corrupted innocence. What makes this particular entry in Zenescope's universe significant is how it provides the mythological foundation for everything that follows. Understanding Alice's sacrifice gives way to her daughter Callie's later struggles and explains why Wonderland remains such a persistent threat. The series just doesn't tell Alice's story. It establishes the rules and the stakes that will govern future stories in the universe.
Welcome to Operation Smokescreen, where the lies unravel and the real story begins. These aren't just plot twists, they're strategic deceptions buried beneath the panels. Hidden motives, double crosses, and narrative ambushes, we expose them all. Classified spoilers ahead, Agent. Let's break the illusion. Smokescreen number 1, the soul split revelation. Alice's consciousness being literally divided between two worlds isn't revealed until the first issue's climax, completely reframing everything readers thought they understood about her situation. The split explains why the Alice who returned to our world had no memory of Wonderland while still carrying its psychological scars. Smokescreen, screen number 2, the grandfather's true sin. The revelation that Alice's grandfather wasn't just a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in the cosmic conflicts comes midway through the series. His debt to Wonderland was payment for power he used to protect previous generations, making Alice's sacrifice the price for her family's survival. Smokescreen number 3, the Queen of Spades' identity. Learning that the Queen of Spades was herself a sacrifice from a previous generation recontextualizes her entire relationship with Alice. She's not just an ally, but a potential future version of what Alice could become, adding urgency to Alice's character choices. Smokescreen number 4, the Jabberwocky's true nature. The monster isn't just a dragon, but a cosmic force representing entropy itself, capable of spreading its corruption beyond Wonderland to other realms. This elevation of the threat level transforms the final battle from personal survival to cosmic significance. Smokescreen number 5, the predetermined sacrifice. The final issue reveals that Alice's entire journey was orchestrated by forces beyond her grandfather's understanding, with her specific psychological profile making her the ideal candidate to resist corruption while still being strong enough to face ultimate evil. Every choice she made was simultaneously free will and cosmic necessity.
Within the broader landscape of dark fantasy comics, Grimm Fairy Tales presents Alice in Wonderland represents a sophisticated evolution of the twisted fairy tale subgenre that began gaining popularity in the late 1990s. While early attempts at reimagining classic stories often relied heavily on shock value and surface-level inversions, Gregory's approach demonstrated a deeper understanding of the way these stories have endured and what makes them psychologically resonate. The series exists within a cultural context where audiences have become increasingly interested in examining the darker implications of childhood stories, from psychological interpretations of Disney films to the academic analysis of Brothers Grimm's original tales. The comic industry's relationship with horror has always been complicated, with mainstream publishers often struggling to balance commercial viability with genuine scares. Independent publishers like Zenescope found success by targeting specific audiences willing to embrace more extreme content. But the best entries in their catalog transcend simple exploitation. This Alice series succeeds because it uses its horror elements to explore genuine psychological truths, rather than simply shocking readers for its own sake. Comparing this work to Neil Gaiman's approach in Sandman reveals interesting contrasts in how different creators handle mythological horror. Where Gaiman often uses classical mythology and literary references to create a sense of timeless dread, Gregory grounds his horror in a more intermediate, visceral experiences that feel contemporary despite the fantasy setting. Both approaches work, but Gregory's method creates a more accessible entry point for readers who might be intimidated by Gaiman's dense literary references. The comparison to American McGee's Alice video game series is inevitable and illuminating. Both properties understand that most effective way to subvert childhood innocence is through careful character development rather than random violence. Mike Carey's Lucifer series provides another useful comparison point for how supernatural prison realms can be portrayed. Carey's hell operates according to complex metaphysical rules that reflect psychological concepts about free will and redemption. Gregory's Wonderland functions similarly, but focuses more on psychological rather than theological themes. Both characters understand that fantasy horror works best when the supernatural elements serve as metaphors for real human experiences. The reception of this series among both critics and fans have been notably positive, with many readers citing it as proof that Zenescope could produce work that transcends their reputation for cheesecake art and exploitation content. The series demonstrated that horror comics could tackle serious themes without abandoning entertainment value, helping to establish a template that other publishers would follow in subsequent years. The legacy of this particular story within Zenescope's catalog can't be overstated. It provided the mythological foundation that would support years of subsequent Wonderland stories, establishing character relationships and world-building elements to continue to pay dividends in current publications. More importantly, it proved that audiences were hungry for horror comics that respected both their intelligence and their emotional investment in the characters. Top Operative Award, Alice Liddle. Alice earns this recognition not for her supernatural abilities or combat skills, but for her psychological resilience in the face of unimaginable horror. Gregory crafts a protagonist who grows stronger through trauma without losing her essential humanity, creating a character who feels both heroic and relatable. Alice's internal monologue throughout the series provides insight into how people can maintain their moral compass even when surrounded by forces that actively corrupt everything they touch. Her greatest victories come not from defeating monsters, but from choosing compassion over revenge, protecting over power, and sacrifice over self-preservation. Alice Liddle stands as one of horror comics' most compelling protagonists because her strength comes from her humanity rather than in spite of it. Dark Horse Award, The Queen of Spades. While other characters get more dramatic moments and flashier powers, the Queen of Spades quietly steals every scene she appears in through sheer force of character development. Her reveal as a previous sacrifice who chose to become a protector rather than a ruler adds layers of meaning to every interaction with Alice. The Queen serves as both a mentor figure and a potential future, showing readers what Alice could become if she makes different choices. Her understated wisdom and tragic backstory create emotional weight that enhances the entire series, proving that sometimes the most impactful characters are those who've already completed their character arcs before the story even begins. Spyglass Sequence Award, Alice's First Kill. The moment when Alice is forced to take down a life to protect another trapped soul represented in this series. Most emotionally devastating scene there is. Gregory handles this moment with extraordinary care, showing both the necessity of Alice's action and the profound psychological cost. The sequence unfolds over several pages, building tension throughout the action, but through Alice's internal struggle between her moral beliefs and her brutal realities of survival. Grimm Fairy Tales presents Alice in Wonderland succeeds on multiple levels that make it essential reading for horror comic fans and fantasy enthusiasts alike. The series demonstrates exceptional character development through Alice's transformation from an innocent child to determined warrior, grounding fantastical elements in psychological truth that makes the horror feel authentic. Gregory's writing balances exposition with action effectively, revealing the mythology gradually while maintaining narrative momentum. The emotional core remains strong throughout, with Alice's moral struggles providing genuine stakes that go beyond simple survival. Robert Gill's artwork deserves equal recognition for supporting the story themes throughout visual storytelling that tracks Alice's psychological development as much as her physical journey. The horror elements work because they serve character development rather than existing for shock value alone. The world building creates a coherent mythology that supports not just the story, but the entire Zenescope Wonderland universe, establishing rules and relationships that continue to pay dividends in subsequent series. The series does have some weaknesses that prevent it from achieving true masterpiece status. The pacing occasionally rushes through important revelations, particularly in later issues where the cosmic scope threatens to overwhelm the entire personal stakes and makes Alice's journey less compelling. Some supporting characters feel underdeveloped, existing more as plot functions rather than realized individuals. The violent, while generally purposeful, occasionally crosses into exploitation territory that might alienate readers looking for psychological horror over gore. For comic book readers, this series offers an ideal entry point into Zenescope's catalog while avoiding the publisher's reputation for prioritizing cheesy art and storytelling substance. Young adult writers who've outgrown traditional fairy tales aren't ready for extreme horror will find this series hits the perfect middle ground. Horror fans looking for psychological depth rather than simple scares will appreciate Gregory's focus on character development and moral complexity. The replay value here is exceptionally high, with early issues containing details that take on new meaning after reading the entire story. The series rewards careful readers who pay attention to background details and character interactions, creating an experience that improves with subsequent readings. Knowing Alice's ultimate fate adds tragic weight to her early moments of innocence that enhances the emotional impact. Compared to other dark fantasy series, this Alice story holds up well against more famous works while offering its own unique perspective on trauma, sacrifice, and heroism. It lacks the literary density of Sandman or the physiological complexity of Lucifer, but it provides more emotional accessibility than any of the other series. The comparison to American McGee's Alice feels apt, with both properties understanding how to subvert childhood icons effectively. This series represents a high point for Raven Gregory's writing career and demonstrates Zenescope's potential when they prioritize story over sensationalism. The character work alone justifies this series' existence, but the mythological foundation it provides for future Wonderland stories makes it historically significant with all of the publisher's catalog. Alice's journey from victim to hero feels earned through careful character development rather than convenient plot devices. The creators deserve recognition for tackling serious themes without abandoning entertainment value, proving that horror comics can be both thoughtful and exciting. This series stands as evidence that independent publishers can produce works that rival mainstream offerings when they commit to strong storytelling fundamentals. Anyone interested in how classic stories can be successfully reimagined for contemporary audiences should study this series as a masterclass in respectful subversion. I'm giving Grimm Fairy Tales Alice in Wonderland a solid 8.5 out of 10. The exceptional character work and mythological foundation overcome the occasional pacing issues and underdeveloped supporting characters. This series comes highly recommended for anyone interested in psychological horror, dark fantasy, or sophisticated approaches to fairy tale reimaginings. New readers should definitely start here before diving into the broader Wonderland mythology, while established fans will find essential background information that enhances every subsequent story in this universe. That's a wrap on our deep dive into the twisted rabbit hole of Zenescope's Alice in Wonderland. This series proves that the best horror comes from watching characters we care about face impossible choices and somehow find the strength to do what's right. If you're hungry for more psychological horror that doesn't insult your intelligence, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. We've got classified briefings on more hidden gems from the world of independent comics coming your way. Drop a comment below and let me know what other dark fairy tale reimaginings you'd like us to analyze. Until next time, I'm Thorn Bishop, reminding you to question everything you think you know about Happily Ever After. Stay vigilant and remember, some rabbit holes lead to more than just adventure.